Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of 30 Minutes with a Modern Mystic. My name is Sascha. This is Michael, and we welcome you. And we'll talk about souls today. Michael, what is a soul?
What is a soul? Well, I have one on the bottom of each of my feet.
Right.
But I suspect you might have something different in mind. So a soul is a state of consciousness that is ever growing, a state of awareness that should also be ever growing, and you could almost say a soul is a child of God.
Okay. Are we souls? Are we humans? Are we humans with a soul?
We are souls with a human having a human experience. We are not human souls. Souls don't take on the species that we're incarnating in to have our experiences. A soul is a soul. In other words, in many ways, it is a pure embryonic essence of supreme creation. You can say God if you like. It's an embryonic essence that has eternity to grow to the point where it reaches supreme creation, creating its own universes and peopling them. So the whole journey of the soul is one of learning creation.
Okay. Considering there's no time metaphysically, do souls still have age though?
Souls have age in experience. Let's just take the human line of this. When we incarnate, in some cases, the person who has focused very much on their spirituality, the question has come up, who am I? Even going back hundreds of years, there is the fact that we are spiritual beings, and that spirituality has attracted many souls. And so they move on a journey or path, if you like, that gives them a greater experience of what this is. Probably the majority move on a path that is about material possession, about materialism far more than the spirituality. So gradually over thousands of incarnations, there's quite a chasm appears, in as much as some souls are far more experienced and wiser than other souls, and they might have started off, and this is purely wrong, but they could have started off on the same day. But in fact, souls are being created basically all the time, and because souls are metaphysical, you can't really put an age to a soul. So when we say that is an old soul, what we're really meaning is that is a very experienced and wiser soul.
So would you say that souls are never born and they never die, or can souls die?
Souls are never born and they never die. Souls, as human beings, we started, if you like, eons and eons ago, millions upon millions of years ago, as a spark of potential that came from supreme creation. What we did with that potential. So let's just say, because you've got to put this into human language and it really doesn't belong there, let's just say that a spark of divinity has the potential to become self-aware and sentient. And so that sets off on its journey. For many, that is lost, that sentience, that it never develops, and they are assimilated back into oneness and probably start the journey again. So everything that we see in nature is part of that journey towards sentience, that long, long, endless, vast journey towards sentience. We've reached a place where we have sentience, although sometimes I question it in humanity. And we are in a long, long process ahead of us in the development, in the conscious development now of our consciousness. Whereas if you're living subconsciously, you're really not developing consciousness at all. Hence the situation we now find ourselves in.
Looking at it from a cosmic perspective, is every being in the whole multiverse on the same journey soul-wise, so that they begin as this spark of divine potential, to stick with your words, and then...
Well, there are, the Pleiadians tell us there are 49 billion universes. And I'm sure that many of those universes consider they have their own God. But I suspect that the foundation of all this is one incomprehensible source of supreme creation, which is love and intelligence of an unimaginable immensity that there's no way you could get your head around, and that it all began from there. And this is, you know, eternity is a long time, and eternity in the whole timelessness of all this, considering there are so many parallel universes and multiverses, the scale is beyond staggering. But somewhere in that, there is a simplicity, a lack of complexity, a simplicity that is also sort of very encouraging.
Do
animals, like I can grasp that simplicity. I mean, in the vastness of it, but I can't explain it because the language is inadequate.
Okay. Do animals and plants and minerals have souls like we do as human beings?
They are more embryonic souls than we are, but they're all eventually on their way to make the vast leap into etheric and into astral development, where they then take on the incredible thing of development of imagination, which no animals have. They have plenty of intelligence, but imagination is the final tool where you create your own life. So that you then have the ability to create a life that honors you, which honors your supreme creator. Animals follow their biological program. We make the program we follow. But unfortunately, the pitfall that most of humanity fell into is the subconscious. And some of us, as we're waking up, we have climbed out of it. Spiritual enlightenment means you have climbed out of that subconscious pit. But as we touched on last night, once you have the free will to do that, your freedom is found in as much as you are totally committed to unconditional love. And the paradox is, in that total commitment to unconditional love, there is total freedom, but it's not really the old free will.
Okay. Going back to animals and plants, would it be possible for an ant to, let's say, move on to be a rat, then move on to be a deer, just going by size now, then move on to be an elephant, and then at some point be a human? Or
an ant is very much like a starling, like a shoal of fish. They are experiencing a group soul. And so when each species of ant would have a group soul, each species of fish would have a group soul. We're not talking whales because they're not fish. And so then you get into the herds of animals and there's a group soul. But when you get into the higher, as the consciousness rises, and I'm sorry for people who don't like this, but the predators are in that higher consciousness. Their intelligence is mostly way above the herds and groups like that. But as the consciousness rises, there is, we'll talk about that when we do nature next year, there's an incredibly involved way that nature evolves through that whole process. But yes, they move from a group soul, a massive group soul, to smaller group souls, to eventually there's family soul, and then eventually to the greater potential of humanity that is now developing and still in these stages of developing individual soul. You've only got to watch a crowd panic and you'll realize that this is still in development. And so an individual soul is like an undivided duality. And so under stress, you get the crowd, and the crowd is the group soul moving back, moving away from the greater development into the group soul. But as they develop further and further, you get the individualized soul, and that soul then becomes one in the all, and the all in one. And so somehow releases the individualization without ever releasing it. Sorry, but that's the paradox.
Yeah. Does this mean that all humans have gone through the evolution of mineral, plant, animals, etc.?
Yes, we've all been through the evolution of nature. This is why when we treat nature so abominably, we really have no idea what we do. Today, on this kindergarten planet, there are a lot of very, very lost souls. The problem arises when the personality dominates the soul. The soul never seeks to dominate, but it does seek to guide. But when you have young souls, they're easily dominated. So and then they're more easily controlled.
At what point in this evolution, if we want to name it evolution, does personality come into play?
The personality comes into play in the higher animals, very much so. I've even seen it as a dairy farmer in my cows. Now, you've got to remember that when you get like dairy farmer, the cows, the beef farmer, the cows, the shepherd, the sheep, the pets, the zoos, all these animals of many species come into proximity with the human consciousness. And even though we berate and criticize and judge ourselves hugely, our consciousness is way above theirs, and it does lift those species. Even the food animals that serve us as food are lifted in the whole process, even though we do their dying process of abattoirs abominably. Nevertheless, the lift is there. As I said the other day, they don't live in the abattoirs. It's simply a fairly quick visit. And so we have a long way to go to live in a way that honors life. But that's the development. That's where we're moving. And higher souls do live in such a way. And in fact, it says here, if you honor self, you honor life. If you honor life, life will honor you. And that means when you honor life, you're honoring all life, nature, the earth, and humanity.
What is a character or personality then, if we put soul and character on one sheet and we want to compare them? What is a character?
A character is the individual, is the development. Okay, let's go back to the beginning. As a soul incarnates, it develops characteristics and personality. Now, the characteristics may be highly negative, they may be highly positive, but these characteristics are an energetic development that the soul takes on. When the soul goes through transition, there is no death, and the soul leaves the body, the personality tends to fade, but some of the characteristics stay, the deeply imprinted one, negative or positive. If they're negative, then they become a handicap for the soul, and the soul's got to go through that. And if they're positive, then it becomes an asset for the soul. But there's never any accident in this, because in the oneness of all life, not a sparrow can fall out of place, out of timing. And so everything is happening within a vast holographic spectrum of utter perfection. We fail to see that, but it's there. I do see it. And this is why what we're going through is just part of that, helping us to reach our perfection.
Is it also possible to go backwards, as from human to less sentient?
Okay, now that was one that I had to deal with quite a number of years back, because I always said that a human soul does not regress backwards into an animal soul. But since then, I had an opportunity to redress that and re-look at that, because it was a belief rather than an experience. And so I have found that a few souls who are definitely more advanced, generally guide souls, will have a short incarnation as an animal for the particular person that they come into their lives of. J. Allen Boone wrote a book long ago, Strongheart, maybe 60, 70 years ago. Strongheart was a German shepherd, and Strongheart was definitely his guide soul that was trying to reach him in a way that he couldn't be reached by humans.
What is a guide soul?
That does not happen commonly.
What is a guide soul? Could you elaborate on that?
A guide soul is a soul that that was created long, long before us. You realize, of course, there are sentient beings that have almost become, there is no such thing as extinction, who have left physicality and gone on to pure essence, pure spiritual essence, before we even began. So this is, you know, in timelessness. You see, here we go. We go with.
I'm wondering, paradox. Like that's the intriguing part. In timelessness, there is no beginning and no end.
Everything is timeless, and so you've got to look at you have to look back into the nucleus of creation and realize it's the same time as now. And the left, you see, our intellect can't wrap itself around
just
that.
Can't get it.
We can when we move on further. We have a more holistic brain, but our whole educational system has taken away from a holistic education into a left brain development for a reason.
It's probably like layers of an onion, and you only see the top of the onion, but the guide soul exists at the core before, but it's still in the same space, something like that.
So let's put it away. I'll leave the mystery with you. The guide soul is one that has done this long before us and is therefore fully capable of guiding us through this. And basically, each person has a guide soul. And as one person said to me, my God, if they've done every life with me, don't they get incredibly bored? And I could see where they were coming from.
Is it one guide soul, one soul, or is it one guide soul, many souls?
Basically, in the early development, a guide soul with a group of souls, like a soul grouping or family of souls. But as you develop and keep developing, a guide soul for each person. And the guide soul lives in timelessness. For the guide soul, no time passes, which I think is very good for them.
In the beginning, you mentioned the word oversoul. So what's the difference, or what is an oversoul, now comparing it with a soul and with a guide soul?
So an oversoul is, there would be guide souls for oversouls, but they would not be guide souls for souls, individualized souls. So the oversoul might have a soul family of, let's say, 300 people that are incarnating with souls that are aspects of the oversoul. They are also on the path of development toward one day becoming oversouls themselves. So an oversoul has a particularly powerful guide, and then there are even greater guides that guide families of oversouls with families of souls. Don't go too complicated with this because it can get a bit of a muddle. You see, you've got to, again, put time on hold, and you've got to try to, we can't think in holistic terms because we're not put together that way.
I imagine it as some type of a root network. If you look at a tree and it just, it starts at some point and it just goes down further and further, and the further it goes, the more uncountable branches you get of these tiny roots. And so
it is said, before you continue, that some of the biggest forests on the planet are joined up with one network, a single network of fungus. The mycelium connect every tree to every tree. You could almost say the mycelium is the oversoul.
So the oversoul of the oversouls, that's what supreme creation, in your words, would be?
Eventually, you could say that I could give license that supreme creation could be the supreme oversoul of all creation. Yes, that would be an interesting term. I quite like it.
Looking back at what we spoke about last time, we had those 2 sessions about aliens and their development, etc., and other species out there. And we talked about this group, the raw contact, and they said that they are a social memory complex. And I find it very interesting that now you said animals begin as a collective soul and they move towards individualization. And then it seems that from that individualization, we again move towards something which again is a group soul, but a different type of group situation where now everybody has moved beyond maybe spiritual enlightenment and has moved beyond. And then again, it's a group thing. So it's from group to individual to group.
Well, I would call that at the beginning, there is a group soul for many expressions of that, like a herd of GNU, which could be 100,000. But then when you get to the following, that is no longer a group soul, that is oneness expressing through the souls as one. And so they've let go of the borders and boundaries of division. So in other words, there is a vulnerability there that is probably incomprehensible to us. It's a vulnerability and an openness and a love that brings them together, and yet they would retain individuality without attempting to retain it.
Yep, exactly. Yep, that's the paradoxon, right? Okay, so going back one step to what I said before, with that process from non-sentient group type of soul to more and more sentient, more individualized, and then eventually being individualized without caring about being individualized, so being the one in all and the all in one, and then becoming a bigger group. Would that be the same for all species, all types of beings?
The eventual, in eternity, that's the eventual, yes, and then beyond that. But what I would say is on this earth, we can be the one in all and the all in one. But they've reached the point where they are the all in all. And on this planet, there's not too many are aware of themselves. They're very aware of themselves as the one in all, but to experience themselves as the all in one is a very uncommon experience. But then the all in all is a quantum leap, a vast quantum leap, but beyond that. So this is what we're talking about, or you are, with Ra.
And I guess relating to what Indian mystics talk about, they always have these different steps of samadhi. And for example, they speak of the two most commonly known samadhis as Nirvikalpa Samadhi, which is basically, they say, soul realization. And then they have Maha Samadhi, which is, it's probably, maybe it's comparable to the all in all. So they have this.
I have to say, I've read a lot about that. I haven't experienced them. Some of the Indian saints and mystics leave me in complete awe of what they're able to do. And some of them leave me in complete awe as to why they would even do it.
Right.
That is not a criticism. That's simply a statement.
I get it. How about going back to the topic of souls? How about twin souls, twin flames, partner souls, this whole topic?
Do they exist? We have, through the ages, you often find souls become very bonded with each other. And so often they will incarnate in proximity to each other. And sometimes in rare and rather beautiful cases, they are opposite sex and marry. And sometimes they're the same sex and live together. Sometimes it might be a grandparent with granddaughter or grandchild. Sometimes it's the friend. Sometimes it's a beautiful blonde down the road whose husband is an ex-wrestler. Okay, I'm joking. But what I'm saying is this bonding does take place. Often a soul will incarnate without their soul bond because the greatest potential is to incarnate without it. So always that works in with the greatest potential for each of these people. Twin flames are inclined to be, on the Sunshine Coast, there are two twins, identical twins, and they are so close that they speak, and in their talking, one never talks alone, the other one talks with her. And so they speak sentences together, and one will stop and the other continue, and it's absolutely, completely unbroken. They dress alike, think alike, speak alike, they are alike, and it's quite amazing to watch them and listen to them, and I consider they are twin flames. So in other words, it's two bodies sharing two undivided souls.
Okay. There are some.
I consider that is rare.
There are some who say that every soul, even though there is a timeless realm, and even though there is no beginning and end, it is said that every soul is created with another soul, so that we have those two, that we have basically partner souls right from the beginning. So you wouldn't agree with that. You would say it is more of a conditioning process that
I would not. I would tend not to agree with that, but with no dogma. You know, if people want to agree with that, I'm fine. But I would tend to say that the great law, like attracts like, consciousness attracts consciousness. And I think that in the development of all this, certain souls were so similar, so attracted to each other, they started bonding and connecting. The danger is that they become attached. And that attachment is an emotion. An emotional attachment is a low energy. And so when there is love in that bonding, it is wonderful. But when there is simply emotional attachment in it, however primitive that may begin, then those two will be destined to be torn apart. And so they can come back together in love rather than emotional attachments. But there are shades and values of this that are almost beyond descriptions.
So, in other terms, according to your perception, soulmates, as a result of a long time in no time, having spent
Soulmate.
having spent together, yes, but soulmates in terms of two that are made for each other right from the beginning in your perception, no.
I think I tend to think not, because the beginning, where is the beginning? I mean, it's too far back to be a beginning. Maybe when we stepped into the etheric, there was a mutual attractions, and you could call that a beginning, but I don't see it that way. But it's very valuable to us. What you call soulmate, I call soul bond, because, you know, we are mates implies man and woman, and we are actually androgynous souls. So I don't see that at all. But the simple fact is that where we once had the opportunity to walk the path of individuality and oneness, we took the path of separation and illusion.
That is a perfect transition to my question that I just had in mind now. Is it very common out there in the multiverse for beings to go through a process of separation where you're not aware that you have a soul or that you are a soul, and that you are living in this completely separated world of illusion? Or is it something very special to our human experience?
Yes, welcome to 2021, planet Earth, where I think millions, maybe billions, are not aware that they're a soul and couldn't care less because they fear death, and that's all for them. So yes, they're here now.
But is it a very common experience looking at all the other beings that exist out there? Is it something unique to humans?
You've got to remember there are a lot of beings that are living on a lower level than we are, particularly human beings, and a lot of other beings living on a lower level than we are. We are not at the bottom of the heap. And so, you know, we're doing the best we can, but we were, as it were, forced into subjection by the Anakai a long, long time ago, and have been struggling out of the shadows toward the light for a long time. Some gave up and just went with their old programming of eons ago. Others never gave up and struggled away from that programming, and still are.
So you would say that our separation from the awareness that we are a soul was intentionally installed, right?
At the very initially, yes. I think it was when we were being used as slaves. I'm pretty sure that was, that was initially installed, but somewhere in our consciousness that fit in with what we're growing into and what we will becoming. So what looked as a curse will, I'm sure, one day be a blessing. As Krishnamurti would say, out of the negative arises the positive. And that was very negative. But I suspect that this crop of humanity has a potential probably more vast than has been seen in a long, long time.
As a human, I feel very physical. I feel my body, I look through my eyes, I hear, I smell, I taste. And I guess 95% or maybe more of our days are centered around our physical material experiences, all the things we have to do. And we're mostly brought up, if we're not lucky and have parents who teach us otherwise, we're mostly brought up with the idea that that's all there is, folks. What can we do to become more aware of ourselves as soul that have a physical experience?
I think first has to become, who am I? Spiritual inquiry. And that has to come in perfect timing from within us. When we're over subconscious and overburdened with fear, that question, that inquiry is sort of put on hold. Like I said, so many millions, probably billions, are the victims of that early programming long, long ago. They've had the opportunity to climb out of it, as has all of us, but they haven't done that. So which comes first, the chicken or the egg? The answer is consciousness comes first. And gradually, we have forever the consciousness of every human being reaches a point when, so am I physical or is there something more than this? And
so let's say we are at this point. Let's take a human being who is at the point the question has arisen. It's the timing for truth and begins the seeking. What would you suggest to get more in touch with one's own soul or a metaphysical existence?
Even choosing love, there has to be an awareness of what love is. And, it's hard to realize, but there's a large percentage of people have no idea what love is. I get many messages from people on their spiritual path. What is love? Tell me. And if the consciousness is not ready to hear, then you can't, there is no answer to that. So I'm thrown back to where we were before. The consciousness of a person has to grow to the point where they're ready to live. I have a immediate family, 3 sons and a daughter. And one son's put me out of his life. I think he's got past his hate, but he hasn't got past his anger for me. Another son I'm very close to, and he's on his spiritual path. My daughter's on her spiritual path. My second son I love very much. He is on a path, but is certainly not focused in towards spirituality, is focused in toward gun collecting, not guns to go out and kill, but guns that are, to him, are beautiful objects. Now, the influence I've had on my family is negligible, nothing. I have far more influence on people out in the greater world than I do on him. And I love him regardless, unconditionally, because he is a manifestation of love in human form. But he has to find that in his own timing. So once it seemed that he might, but then long ago he left that. Now, this is not a criticism of him or a judgment, but, my own family, I can't do anything about it.
Okay, the time is up, I think, for this session. But so in closing...
It was up 10 minutes ago.
No, we started 10 minutes later, I think.
No, we didn't.
So I think in closing, you could say, like you always say, truth has its timing. But once there is that timing for you, once you feel like, oh my God, who am I? Am I physical? And once you start to wonder about these things, then it's just you need to find your own way, right? What is right for you? There's no general answer.
I mean, can you criticize a chicken's egg that takes, 2 or 3 weeks to hatch for not hatching in 1 week? And the flower that needs sun and water, rain to unfold and flower, otherwise it will prolong the budding. And so humanity is the same. Unfortunately, with humanity, there are many who look at the bud and criticize it. They are terrified if the flower will not be good enough. And so they've kept closed up for hundreds of incarnations because they're afraid that the flower might not be good enough. I know that sounds strange, but at the depths of that, you'll find a profound truth.
I think that's a beautiful closing. We should leave it at that, unless you want to add something.
Not really. I mean, humanity takes very little notice of timing. To nature, it is the heartbeat of nature.
Timing is everything in nature. Yep.
We need to give it more focus.
Okay. Well, thank you, Michael, and thank you everyone for listening. And this time we're closing maybe with the reminder that if you want to follow Michael, just look at the video, and below the video, there are a couple of links. You can share his profiles. You can go there, you can follow him on so many different profiles, and be sure to share this with your friends, whoever you think is interested. And looking forward to seeing you again.
Thank you very much, Sascha, for your tenacity and ability.
Thank you,
Much
Michael.
appreciated.